Let's move on to the next session. In this session, we are having 4 different keynote speakers: William Anthony Yanko, Ellis Imrai Pepinau, Jim Donaghy, and Mr. Kevin Dunn. Each of keynote speakers are going to deliver their presentations around 30 minutes and followed by Q&A, and will be led by Bang Rahardianto as the moderator for this session. Here is a brief information about Bang Rahardianto. Bang Rahardianto is a lecturer on management program, copywriter, branding and HR consultant, freelance photographer, and DIY music shows organizer. He involved in various social activism and active in formal and semi-formal learning group. Okay, for Bang Rahardianto, please take your time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, I can't believe it's my turn. And first thing first, of course, I have to greet all of you, but I decided to greet you with my time. So since it is afternoon here, then good afternoon, everyone, and probably good morning to all the keynote speakers. Well, I'm quite speechless because I don't know. I think Fahran made a bad decision to choose me because, well, first thing first, I'm not that fluent in English, but I think it's okay. I can still understand few words, of course, and I still can bridge all the discussion between you and the audiences. And probably I will also open the Q&A session, but I will first confirm to all the keynote speakers, which is the William Anthony Yanko, Ellis Papinho, Jim Donaghy, and also the mighty Professor Kevin Dunn, because of his reputation in the research of the global punks that influenced me up until today. Which one would you like to prefer? The Q&A right after your presentation, or let all the keynote speakers do the presentation first, and then we will have a long Q&A session, or it's up to you what makes it comfortable for you. So I will just follow your instruction. Okay, what about William Anthony? Is it comfortable for you to long Q&A? Yes, I saw in the chat, because actually sometimes if I attend academic conferences, then we have like unfair time. What makes it unfair is all the speakers have like quite long time to do the presentation, like 30 minutes or something, and only 10-minute Q&A. For me, it's a bit unfair because all of the dialectics, all of the ups and downs, all of the Q&As will be great if they provide a longer time. So meanwhile, I read the chat. Then, oh yes, long Q&A sounds fun. So I think okay. So which one should we choose? Okay, so since it's 50-50, then let's try to do all the presentation, and we have the long Q&A session after that. And for those who want to ask in Indonesian language, please feel free. So you can write it in the chat box, or you can ask it directly later. But one thing for sure, that you have to write down all of the questions, because it will be quite long presentation as well. But I'm pretty much quite sure that this one will not getting boring or something, because each keynote speakers that the first one will present their whatever paper, research, or anything is the William Anthony Yanko. Okay, we have like 20 to 30 minutes maximum to do the presentation, and then we can continue by Alice Papiniu. So, William Anthony, the place is yours.
Okay, can you guys see the screen?
Yes.
Yep. Yep. All right. All right. Shall we get started now? Hey everyone. My name is William Yanko. I'll be doing this really short talk about my thesis. I'll just be presenting two chapters from thesis, and I'll just be giving a pretty short stories that inspire the thesis and why I'm doing this. Before we get started, I would like to first express my acknowledgement of country. So I would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations as the traditional owners of the land on which RMIT University stands and conducts its business. I respectfully recognize elders past, present, emerging, and future. Next, I would like to give a massive shout out to Fakhran and PSN Indonesia. He's kind enough to extend this keynote invitation to me, someone who is yet to have a PhD and who is not a punk scholar. I cannot thank you enough, Fakhran, for this opportunity, and I hope that we can all learn together. So, what are we talking today? Well, today we are talking a little bit about my thesis. I know that it's not a punk study, but some aspect of it derived from punk as well. I guess after coming in as a moderator last year, you can say that I've successfully infiltrated this punk community. So I'll first talk about who I am and my academic background. I'll then talk about why we need more Indonesian hip hop scholars and how my work contributes to this emerging field of Indonesian hip hop studies. I know we don't really have heaps of time, so I'll go very briefly through two of my thesis chapters. The first one I call Regional Politics, and the second I call Traditionalist Politics. Lastly, I'll give a really brief recap to conclude my session. So it'll be a pretty short talk. So let us first start here. My name is William Anthony Yanko. As you can tell from my name, I'm an Indonesian. I'm a final stage PhD candidate at RMIT University's School of Media and Communication under the supervision of Dr. Shirley Brandt and Dr. John Postel. The working title of my thesis is Mapping the Politics of Indonesian Hip Hop. As I have mentioned previously, this keynote speech will go very, very briefly through some key points of two of my chapters. And I'll go more into detail about it in the following slides. Apart from working on my thesis, I've been a sessional tutor and sessional lecturer for a number of courses at RMIT and Monash as well. For instance, I taught popular culture, I taught audio technology, capstone project, and more. All right. Enough about me.
Siapa tuh Mas Yanko? Jam 9. Iya.
I think there's someone there. All right.
Panitia mungkin.
All right. As far as you can see, unlike punk and hardcore, there are not that much research yet on Indonesian hip hop. So what my work contributes to and what my work interacts with the most are these scholars. So for instance, in 2005, Borden wrote how rappers perceive themselves as outlaws who defied the authoritarian regime of Suharto. And then we get Miguel Angel Varela, who wrote about how rappers and Japanese leather puppeteers are using hip hop to have popularized wayang. And then we get Eddie Rianto, who wrote about his PhD thesis about the itinerant celebrity status of Juki, the leader of the Jogja Hip Hop Foundation. And then we get Eltham Golpustezat, who wrote about how Indonesian Muslims interpreted hip hop and rap in their everyday lives, how they use their songs and music to document the daily lives and daily struggles, of how these female rappers try to break out of that shell. These are a few of the works of Indonesian hip hop that I see as cornerstones of this growing field. What my PhD thesis intends to do is to provide a map to capture this scene by analyzing the politics of a few selected major groups that are proposed as brokers for their communities. Now to the fun part. So how did I get the data for this research? Well, funny that you ask. I conducted a combination of physical and digital ethnography from 2018 to 2021. The major chunk of the physical ethnography was conducted in January to May 2019, where I went to Jakarta, Bandung, Malang, Surabaya, Yogyakarta, Kuta, Semarang, and Pontianak. There, I conducted both formal and informal interviews and observation. The main technique that I did was basically a snowball technique, because when I went to the field, I didn't know anyone at all. I tried to contact a few people, but none of them came back to me. So when I went to Jakarta, what I did was basically just walk around the neighborhood and ask people, "Hey, do you know a rap or hip hop concert going on? Can you show me where it is?" Just go to cafes, and that's all I did. So it's a totally snowball technique. I basically said yes to whoever wanted to talk to me, including our dear PSN Indonesian leader here. I guess I was extremely lucky back then, because I'm pretty sure you guys still remember in 2019, we got RUU Pemusikan. The draft got leaked right when I was supposed to start my field work. I was then able to use RUU Pemusikan and as a jumping stone to start a conversation with anyone and everyone who wanted to talk about that. And then I just tried to lead that back into Indonesian hip hop and how I can grow my research out of it. In total, I conducted more than 30 formal interviews, and I'm at least no less than like 20 informal talks across Indonesia. I basically just talk to everyone. I talk to rappers, producers, stand-up comics, lecturers, researchers, drug dealers, abang-abang ojek, go-kart drivers, street vendors, cigarette sellers, anyone who wanted to talk to me. Because when I came into the field, I didn't know anything about Jakarta or about Yogyakarta. I grew up in West Borneo, in a really small jungle over there, and I've never been in any of Indonesia's major cities for an extended period of time. The opening line that I did back then was basically, "Hey, do you know anything about Indonesian hip hop?" And that's about it. So over this period of 3 to 4 years, I received such a massive amount of raw empirical data, which thanks to my supervisor, Dr. John Postel, I then used as the foundation to write my thesis. Okay, I understand that this conference operates on a pretty tight schedule, so I'll only give a really brief overview of 2 of my chapters. Let us start with regional politics. So here in this chapter, I study an Eastern Indonesian rap group called Mukarakat. So all of the members of the group are whom I consider domestic migrants. So they are people who migrated from various parts of Eastern Indonesia to pursue higher educations and work. All of the members of Mukarakat are currently living in Bali, Indonesia. So this chapter focuses on that, on the notion of domestic migrants and the issues that they encountered in Western Indonesia, especially in Jakarta, in Bandung, Yogyakarta, and Semarang. The core idea for this chapter came upon me when I conducted an interview in a major high-end shopping mall in central Jakarta called Plaza Indonesia. Some of you who are familiar with the spot know that the place like Plaza Indonesia is filled with high-end branded commercial goods, like all this expensive stuff. And people who went there were supposed to dress nice, whatever that means, right? So that day, I was supposed to have a chat with a domestic migrant who migrated to Jakarta roughly 15 years ago. He is from West Papua, and he works in one of Indonesia's most popular music label. When I arrived at the mall, as any other work interview, I wore a button-up shirt, black pants, my name tag signifying my university affiliation. And my interview participant was wearing similar clothes. He's basically wearing even much more expensive stuff. as we walked past the security guard at the mall, he stopped us and said that he needed to search us for reasons that I could not understand. He checked us with a handheld metal detector while saying, "Dasar babon bulu bau amat." And that comment totally took me by surprise because I did not expect that at all. I asked, "Maaf, tadi Mas bilang apa? Sorry, what did you just say?" Which he then replied, "Oh, bukan ke Masnya, ke Mas yang satunya. Oh, not to you, but to the other person." So I was extremely surprised because that was blatant racism, right? Conducted right in the middle of Jakarta, one of Jakarta's highest end shopping malls. At a man wearing clothes that's perhaps 10 times much more expensive than mine. He was wearing Gucci. That was ridiculous. And similar encounter also happened in Jogja when I went to Yogyakarta to do my research. When I visited Asrama Papua or the Papuan Dome in the city. This was the same place where these students were surrounded by both the police and violent extremist mobs in 2016 and 2019. So what I found when I studied Mukarakat as a domestic migrant group and their concept of regional politics is that Mukarakat created music that was used by their followers to promote 3 points of concerns. So they're concerned about regionalism, they're concerned about anti-prejudice, and they want to talk a lot more about cultural preservation. Here, it is important to note that there were quite a lot of contradictions between the understanding of Mukarakat as a group and their fans. For instance, I think in 2019 or 2020, Mukarakat was involved in a song called Indonesia versus Everybody, released by a Jakarta-based clothing store that was not really well received by their fans. So by studying this group, the songs that they release, their fans' reactions, and the live performances that they conducted when I went to do my field work, I argue that Eastern Indonesians who have migrated from their hometowns in Eastern Indonesia to metropolitan cities in Java are trying to assert and trying to find their own identities in a foreign Western Indonesian world, which were quite different from their hometown and their understanding of what being an Indonesian, what being an Indonesian really is. So a part of the regional politics, as my research argue, is that they're trying to fight this prejudice placed upon them by the locals of the area that they move into. For instance, in my research, I recorded so many instances of Western Papua students getting rejected by local dome owners because of their skin colors, and they told me that this was one of the reasons why many of them congregate together, many of them live together and created all these student these Papuan student domes. That's one of their way to fight this prejudice that's placed upon them. In doing so, they are also trying to preserve their local culture. So that's a part of their politics by continuing to use their local dialects, their accents, their languages that are familiar to them. Because as you might be able to tell, and with some people that I talk to, like Fakran, when I talk to you in Bekasi, not being born in that space, obviously in Jakarta or any other metropolitan city, obviously give you this different accent. And these people, these participants that I talked to, mentioned so many times that they were being discriminated upon. There are various acts of racism that were conducted upon them because of that. So in here, I argue that regional politics is one of the way for these domestic migrants to fight against this notion. The next is traditionalist politics. So here, I study the politics of the famous Jogja Hip Hop Foundation, where they use and are used by the local Yogyakartans to protest against the Sultan of Yogyakarta and his ruling. It is important to note here that I'm studying the context of Yogyakarta and Jogja Hip Hop Foundation in 2019. So this is a time before COVID. I have no idea how much COVID has impacted the group and their politics and also their fans. Nevertheless, I think this will be an important piece of study as it serves as a record of the politics before COVID, which could then be used as a point of comparison to that after COVID. In this chapter of my research, I focus on two songs. The first one is Jogja Istimewa or Jogja Special, and the second one is Jogja Ora Didol or Jogja is not for sale. In my research, I found that there were various fights and conflicts between different ideologies, namely moral values, Japanese understanding of Japanese literatures, the interpretations of being a Japanese male and masculinity, and capitalism within the walls of the Sultanate of Yogyakarta. So in this chapter, I divide them into three subheadings. The first I call Malioboro and modernity. Second, I call Japanese masculinity. And the third one, the palaces ex-retinues. The core of the chapter revolves around my own experience of being in the space, interacting and talking to local Yogyakartans who at the time were struggling with keeping up with the time, with the trend, with how fast things are moving and how fast things are going. So for instance, many of them express similar concerns with Jogja Foundation, where they argue that the embrace of capitalism saw many placement of marketing materials and banners that obstructed the view of Malioboro and the majestic Merapi Mountain. This one I agree with. Another issue that they raised was the embrace of modernity in the form of modern clothing style that Jogja Foundation and some participants argue have demoralizing effects on the local Yogyakartans. I identify this as an example of the Japanese masculinity. So here, I see how they took up example of Yogyakartan women who they claim hate to use sexy and tight clothing. Members of Jogja Foundation and some of their followers claim that wearing this sort of clothing was an offense towards their sense of Japanese masculinity and pride. Some of them told me that Japanese women should not wear that. They should wear kebaya. They should adhere to their culture. In some occasions, a few of the followers of the group actually told me that they agree with the song because pride, kejawaan, was the most important attribute to them, and that the Japanese women should not be showing their bodies to strangers. This was, of course, quite controversial, and I had a really hard time trying to discern that. Some people that I talked to, for instance, a few of the young women who work as cigarette sales promotion girls in Malioboro, that I talked to, told me that they had no options in wearing this sort of clothing. The costume was a requirement for the job, and that without the job, they will not be able to support themselves and their families. Obviously, there's this misunderstanding and this disconnection between the group and the people that they claim to be supporting. And the third was the concept of the ex-retinues. Here, I documented the rising opposition movement to the Sultan with members of Jogja Foundation at the forefront. So I used this subtitle because members of Jogja Foundation were retinues of the Sultan. The Jogja Istimewa song was such a major success that they were appointed as the official cultural ambassadors of the Sultan and of Yogyakarta, right? They were given gifts, even a section of the building owned by the Sultanate that they transformed into a recording studio and a merchandise store. The gifts, however, did not change how some of them feel about Sultan and his recent embrace of capitalism. So, for instance, Yuki decided not to rap with the group for a couple of years because he was unhappy with their status as the apparatus of the Sultan. They were just, in his opinion, they were tools, and he did not want to be a participant in that sort of process. And that's why they released Jogja Ora Didol. Jogja Ora Didol, they want to say, hey, Jogja is no longer special if you want to embrace capitalism, if you want to embrace these changes. We should go back to our traditionalist way. We should go back to the time where we are being cut off from the outside world, when we can be Jakartan, when we can be Japanese. So, just to recap really quickly, my thesis and my research contributes to the scholarly literature on Indonesian hip hop and politics by mapping 4 different types of politics. I'll map out leftist, regional, traditionalist, and peer politics. So I did not include peer and leftist politics in this presentation, as I'm afraid that we might not have enough time for that. And I'm pretty sure the other presenters will have a lot more interesting stuff to say. In mapping these 4 types of politics and bringing in the concept of protest brokers by Dr. Birgit Brohler into this conversation, I argue that there are processes of escalations of these figures of protest brokers. So while throughout my thesis, while Dr. Birgit Brohler argues that protest brokers are all around notion, it's that there are times when they are actually being escalated into the roles. So there were people who were previously not as famous or not as powerful yet. As my presentation shows, there are processes of pushing and pulling and the making of conversation and the making of ideas, where ideologies that the rappers thought to represent the masses, the fans or the people or the communities around them, might not actually do that at all. So these protest brokers figures, as I argue throughout my research, are sometimes created by communities that need and want them, whether they like it or not. And lastly, look at this research as a call for paper and call for future researchers. I hope this presentation and my research inspire and gives you, the listeners and everyone who's in this chat room, ideas for your own research. Personally and academically speaking, I think this field is so rich of empirical materials that calls for researchers such as yourself. I'm just one person who tried to push the boundaries of our understanding of Indonesian hip hop, but I'm sure many of you here are a lot more capable of doing this, and I would love to read them. So while this field might still be the little brother of scholarly world of Indonesian punk or global punk, I think bringing in the ideologies that we are going to hear, or bringing in techniques and ideas that we are going to hear from all the other presenters and incorporating them into this research will be an interesting thing to see, and also vice versa. I would love to see a more direct collaborations between these two significantly different worlds. And I would love to see more Indonesian hip hop research in the future. And that is it from me.
Okay, thank you very much, William Anthony Yanko, for the presentation. Well,
Thanks, Mas.
He proved that hip hop is more punk than punk sometimes, because his research is focused on hip hop, and maybe next time you should include those left side of those hip hop community, because all the punks here loves the political leftist and political hip hop.
Definitely
Mostly,
was.
I think so.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, and,
I got a chapter on homicide that we can talk about later.
Okay, Fahran, maybe we should make some small conferences between the annual conferences of PSN to accommodate this kind of things, I think. Okay, and then it's nice to know that
we can do it this.
Yeah, and nice to know that William is from West Borneo. So I used to work there in the middle of the jungle itself in Ketapang, probably around 10 years ago or something. I live around Kendawangan. Wow. So,
yep.
Well, yes, it's famous for
such a small world.
It is famous for this, mythical kingdom, the Padang 12.
Yep.
Okay. So, yes. So actually, I used to work in the bauxite mining in the middle of the Airu Pass. So I pass Ketapang every day when I have to go back to Java and something. Okay. Well, yes. So this is the punk connection. We will meet somewhere in the future or something like that. So
for sure.
Thanks for the punks. Okay. For the second speaker, what is that? someone from Padang 12 interrupting us. I hope not. So, okay.